It's my pleasure to welcome Father Mike Wurschmidt as our guest speaker today. Father Wurschmidt is a priest for the Anglican Diocese of Pittsburgh and also an Air Force veteran. In 1993, he founded Shepherd's Heart Fellowship, providing outreach to the poor and homeless of the Pittsburgh area. He subsequently established Shepherd's Heart Veterans Home, housing 12 male veterans with the focus being re-entry into society of those suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, or addictive disease. Father Wurschmidt also partners with the fifth-year occupational therapy students at Duquesne University, helping them to develop a life skills course for the veterans living in the home, with the long-term goal being the rehabilitation of the men. Father Wurschmidt.
Good morning, everybody. Give me a moment, please. I want to make sure I have plenty of room up here. What a great honor, privilege it is, as a veteran, 4 years in the Air Force, to be able to be with you today. My father was a career Air Force officer, fought in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. It was a great experience growing up in a military home. I spent part of my high school in the Philippines, and I had the great privilege of going on Corregidor, where General MacArthur made the famous statement, "I shall return." And I marched about 20 miles on the Bataan Death March. Many of you World War II veterans, I pray that I can even shake your hand, because I remember those great years of my high school in the Philippines. Before I share predominantly about homeless veterans and what I do, what my team, what my family, my passion for homeless veterans, I want to tell you a short story. Just under 24 years ago, my wife, who was pregnant for my son, Joel, my second child, my daughter, Kristen, was about a year old. We were living in Denver, Colorado. We were going through a very difficult financial time, and like many of us in this room, you pick up an odd-end job to make extra money. Well, I began delivering the Denver Post newspaper in nighttime, middle of the night. And this one night, I drove into a large apartment complex in east side of Denver. Got out of my car, and I noticed a red fancy sports car to my right. And the reason it stuck out to me in the middle of the night in Denver was it was running, and a garden hose was going from the exhaust pipe around to the driver's side window. I ran over to the car. I banged on the windows. The driver did not answer. The doors were locked. I broke into the car, dragged the man out, honked the horns, yelled and screamed to wake up somebody to call an ambulance. I had no idea, no reason. I didn't even know the man's name, why he was trying to commit suicide. But as I held him on the ground after I was able to revive him, I began asking myself a question. Why? What is so dear to this man that he wants to give up his whole life and commit suicide? What is so horrible that you want to give up? And as I began thinking those rhetorical questions, I began crying uncontrollably. The reason I was crying uncontrollably was because 12 hours earlier, I had taken my car to the mountains west of Denver with the sole intention of driving off the cliff. Because my life, I was filled with shame and guilt because I had lost a business. And I had caused my wife, my pregnant wife, and my daughter to become homeless in Denver, Colorado. As I was holding this precious man, I still do not know whatever happened to him when the ambulance came. I cried out to God and I said, "God, would you give me another chance? God, I don't want to die. I want to live. Lord, I want to help people." God, by His grace, did not allow me to drive off a cliff. And God has given me a second chance, and 24 years later, I stand before you incredibly humbled before my veterans, my heroes, my father, a hero, to do what I do, and that is to find homeless people, homeless families, homeless children, and our homeless veterans, to give them a second chance, because that's what I believe God wants, is to give us a second chance. I've been asked this morning to talk about this collaboration of Friends of Da Nang and Duquesne University in Shepherd's Heart, and I want to focus on three things as I share with you. Why? As a veteran, as a pastor, as a chaplain, I can never forget my veterans on the streets. I can never stop doing what I do. The second point is who are our homeless veterans and what are the reasons why they fall through the cracks of our cities in the United States? And the third is to talk about partnerships and collaborations. Partnerships and collaborations are the most effective way that we have discovered over the last 10 to 15 years that we can effectively help our veterans get off the streets and return to a life of self-sufficiency, a life that of somewhat normalcy. The first point, why I can never stop doing what I do, besides the story I just shared that God gave me a second chance. My father, as I said, was a career officer. For 34 years, he fought in the three wars, World War II, Korea, Vietnam. He died of Agent Orange. He came back from Vietnam when I was still in high school with traumas of war, as we describe now, call it PTSD. None of us in my family, my wife, my mother, and my brothers and sisters, there were 9 of us, we had no idea what was wrong with Dad and all the anger and the rage and the mood swings. But I know now, with all my training and education and all that I do, I know what my father suffered from. I buried my father at Arlington National Cemetery. I had the greatest service I've ever performed, officiated, was at his funeral at Fort Myer Chapel. Many of you know that Army base, the great, beautiful little chapel outside of Arlington National Cemetery gates. And to be able to lead the burial service, my father is a war hero. My mother and my brothers and sisters understand now why our dad was the way he was, and I've been able to help my family forgive my dad. That's a great reason why I cannot stop helping our homeless veterans, especially our combat veterans that fall through the cracks and end up on the streets of the United States. Colonel Dick Pollard, one of my first commanding officers when I was enlisted at the Air Force. He was a POW, spent 6.5 years in Hanoi. And many times I had one-on-ones with Colonel Pollard. And he would teach me that we never leave our soldiers behind in battle. I've taken that one step further. We never leave our veterans behind under bridges or in crack houses or in bars or in warehouses. Why? Because so many of our veterans are still in battle. Their minds are raged, as our Father said in his prayers. Their souls are wounded. And as a veteran, I am called to help set our veterans free that are still fighting the battles in their mind here in the United States on our city streets. Another reason why I must continue to do what I do is because of the success stories that I see every day. The faces of those Vietnam veterans and those veterans of all the different eras make it off the streets and work with me to help other veterans who are still on the streets and with addictive lifestyles get off the streets. Veterans helping veterans is the most successful way that we can help our veterans that are still on the streets. Guys like Bobby. Bobby was a Vietnam veteran. He spent 13, 14 months in Vietnam as an army, in part of the army. He came back, suffered, went through drugs and alcohol, abuse and struggles. I confronted him one day because of some problems he was going through with hoping to help him and to challenge him. A couple months later, his mother called me if I knew where her son was. She asked me to tell Bobby that his father had died. I went under a bridge and told Bobby that his dad had died, and he just went into a great state of depression for months and months, in fact, a couple years, because he had hoped to be reconciled with his dad, and that never happened. Once we finally were able to get Bobby out from under a tent, he looked like he was just been freed from a POW camp in Eastern Europe. He was so emaciated. Now, with the help of such incredible organizations all over our city and the VA healthcare system, Bobby is living in a retirement home here in Pennsylvania, and Bobby's been completely restored and reconciled with his mom and his brothers and sisters. What about James, a Marine? 13 months in country, and his job as a Marine was a body bagger. You all know the stories. You all know the traumas that many of you have experienced. You know in your mind when I say a body bagger, you can see it. Not only did he bag American soldiers killed in Vietnam, but he had to bag the Viet Cong, literally, and get them out of the trees. And I won't use the language that he described, what he had to do to get them out of the trees, and put them in body bags. He came back from Vietnam on a Wednesday, and by the Sunday he was home, and he began to drink and turn to drugs. His marriage fell apart. He was estranged from his 2 children for 18 years on the streets here in Pittsburgh. James now has been reconciled, not with his wife, not with both children, but with at least his daughter. He's fully reconciled. These are the faces and the stories of those that are making it. And every day that I see them, it drives me passionately to help another veteran make it off the streets. And of course, those that we help sometimes die on the streets. Sue, a veteran. She died on the street. A week before she died, she came to me wanting to be reconciled with God, wanting to be reconciled with her family. And we began the process, but over the next few days, for whatever reason, she died on the streets of Pittsburgh. But I had a chance to go to the funeral home where her mom and dad, her sisters, and her daughter were that hadn't seen her in years. And I was able to tell the family about Sue and her desire to be reconciled with them and how she was reconciled with God. And at least we gave them hope that Sue and their family would be together one day again for all eternity. And one of my greatest reasons why I do what I do is because of my call as an Anglican priest, as a pastor, as a federal chaplain with the VA. I understand my call is to the least and the lost and the broken, the homeless, those that suffer from the traumas of life, the traumas of war, and the least and the broken, the poor. They were made in the image of God, and they are His children. That is my call, and I cannot walk away from my call. These are just a few of the reasons I do what I do. The second point is, who are these homeless veterans, and why? Why, for God's sake, do they fall through the cracks of society and end up on the streets of our cities of the United States? It's a shame. But I'm here to tell you that there are groups all over this country and the VA that has made remarkable changes to what they offer in their health care to our veterans. That we are drastically making changes in the numbers of homeless veterans all over the United States. And we are going to continue to work to help our homeless veterans get off the streets and prevent them from getting on the streets. Lord willing, we will not stop. Statistics. I don't like statistics because they don't show the face of the one. They don't show or tell us the life story of the one veteran and why he's on the street. It doesn't tell us what he went through in Panama or Grenada or Vietnam or Iraq or Afghanistan. It doesn't tell us. All it gives us is a number, and I hate numbers. My job is to find the one face, to listen to their story, find out why, so that we can love the one and get as many others involved with me and with us at Shepherd's Heart and with Duquesne and Friends of Da Nang and all the organizations we work with, to bring as many people, many veterans, to work with the one. And by bringing many, we can work with the many. And we can deal with our homeless veteran problem in Pittsburgh, Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, and in these United States. Statistics, I'll give you a few. HUD, VA, the National Coalition of Homeless Veterans give these numbers. Most homeless veterans are male, about 5% are female. We know that most all of our combat-related veterans on the streets have served in all the wars. We've had homeless World War II veterans. Can you imagine that? Korea, we had a Korean, a 72-year-old Korea war veteran in our program. Can you imagine 72 years and homeless on the streets of Pittsburgh? We recently had 3 Iraqi-Afghan war veterans, all under the age of 23, the exact N in our program. True numbers are very difficult to come up with. The VA estimates about 78,000 to 144,000 homeless veterans on the streets of the United States on any given night. We know those numbers probably double the total number of homeless veterans that experience homelessness for 1 or 2 nights or maybe a couple weeks during a course of a year It's well more than 144,000. In Pittsburgh, Allegheny County, we have about 250 to 500 on any given night of homeless veterans. During the course of the year, that's double, if not triple, that a veteran will experience homelessness for whatever length of time, it doesn't matter. That number experience homelessness. The VA Pittsburgh healthcare system, it covers southwestern Pennsylvania, southeastern Ohio, northern West Virginia. We don't really know how many homeless veterans are in the hills of West Virginia, but we know they probably exceed 2,000, maybe upwards to 3,000. And our job is to find them and give them hope again to be reconciled with their loved ones. 20 to 30% of all the total homeless population in the United States are veterans, compared to what we just heard a minute ago. 1% of the total population of the general population of the United States have served in the military. 20 to 30% of our total homeless population in the United States, 20 to 30% are veterans. 1.5 million veterans, we approximate, 1.5 million are at risk of becoming homeless. See, the job is not done. We have a lot of work to do, because our job is not only to help veterans get off the streets, but preventing those 1.5 million from becoming homeless. They're at risk of becoming homeless because of substandard housing, poverty, loss of jobs, PTSD, mental illness, the list goes on. 85% of homeless veterans, listen to this, this is wonderful. 85% have a high school diploma or GED, compared to about 50% of the non-veteran homeless population. These are not dummies. 89% of our homeless veterans have an honorable discharge. Did you hear that? These are men and women that serve their country honorably and are on the streets of our country. 76% of all veterans in our country that are homeless suffer from drugs and alcohol abuse and some form of mental illness. Why? Why are they homeless? Large numbers suffer from the traumas of war. We've been hearing about that, mental illness. Why are they homeless? Because of drug and alcohol and substance abuse. A big one is lack of family and social support. Why do some veterans, warriors that come back from war, and they come to their homes and they suffer from the traumas, the memories, the pictures in their mind, PTSD, why do those veterans make it and don't become homeless? Versus those veterans, same time period, same battles, they end up on the streets of the United States. Dr. Charles Hogue, he wrote a book called Once a Warrior, Always a Warrior. He's a retired Army colonel, psychiatrist, specializes in the effects of war and mental health. And he says the reason the ones do not become homeless is because of their support structure, their families, their churches, the VFWs, the American Legions. People that love them and listen to them and are patient with them. Their marriages, their children. Versus so many that turn to drugs and alcohol and end up on the streets that don't have the support that they rightly deserve and need. The extreme shortage of affordable housing. I rejoiced yesterday, the Secretary of the VA announced 3,000 more housing units in the United States, and I'm so happy about that. But we need more. We need more for our veterans. Lack of jobs, livable income, access to health care, and that's changing. The VA of 2011 is not the VA of 1970s and 1980s, and yes, even the 1990s. And I'm so thankful for that. The good news in these statistics is the numbers of our homeless veterans are going down, but we have so much to do. Third point is the most effective way we can get veterans off the streets of the United States is through partnerships and collaborations. Veteran organizations working with other veteran organizations, faith-based organizations that are good at dealing with recovery issues. Support. Collaborations like you have this morning. Friends of Duquesne University and their students and their commitment to our veterans. and Shepherd's Heart. Let me read you a quote. The National Coalition of Homeless Veterans writes, "The most effective programs for homeless and at-risk veterans, those we mentioned a moment ago, are community-based nonprofits, helping veteran groups. Programs that seem to work best feature transitional housing with a camaraderie of living in structured, substance-free environments with fellow veterans who are supporting and are committed to bettering themselves." Veterans helping veterans. Nothing works better than when you have veterans who understand the traumas of war, that have been in recovery, have been off the streets of our cities, have made it, been reconciled with their families, reaching out, going back onto the streets or back into our drop-in centers, and loving the one, supporting the one veteran that needs our support. This partnership, Shepherd's Heart, for 18 plus years, we've been ministering on the streets of this city. One of the greatest privileges I have ever had, my wife and I and my children, is to come to Pittsburgh and experience this veteran community that is committed to working and finding an answer. Every day we have a shuttle bus that drives free transportation for homeless people and homeless veterans, and my veterans are the drivers. Every day we have a drop-in center, 6 mornings a week, where we have breakfast and laundry and showers and food and clothes, all that you could imagine, and prayer. And it's run by our veterans who have succeeded. Everything we do, we involve our veterans because they understand leadership, they understand the loss, they understand addiction, they understand reconciliation, they understand their love for God and what God has done for them by giving a second chance. May of 2007, we opened up our homeless transitional housing program. Last year, at this time, we had 12 beds for homeless veterans. Because of Friends of Da Nang and the money and the resources they gave us a year ago, we were able to add 3 more beds, and now we have 15. And in the course of the year, what Friends of Da Nang did a year ago, those 3 beds, we have housed anywhere from 15 to 18 veterans and got them off the streets and into programs where they are in the process of becoming whole and healed, reconciled with their loved ones. It doesn't take much to get a bed for a homeless veteran. Duquesne University began to partner with Shepherd's Heart back in the summer of 2007. Professor Dr. Anne Marie Hansen with the Occupational Therapy Department happened to be walking by Shepherd's Heart one day. We came inside, asked us what we did. We told her, and she said, "Would you be interested in our 5th-year students, Occupational Therapy Department, to be part of your program for veterans, teaching them life skills?" And for 4 years, and now we're beginning our 5th year. Wonderful success, recognized by the Occupational Therapy Association of the state of Pennsylvania. And they gave a presentation to Congress about what they're doing, teaching life skills to homeless veterans. In addition, Duquesne University has partnered with their program called Service Learning, where the freshmen and their sophomores spend time in our drop-in center and working with our homeless as well as our veterans, getting an idea what goes on, how can we help somebody that's hurting, so when they graduate from Duquesne, wherever they end up, they too can get involved with organizations that work with the broken, the disenfranchised, and even homeless veterans. Friends of Da Nang, you saw the slides. I don't need to repeat those stories. But what they have done and what they are doing, and I'm so blessed to be connected to Friends of Da Nang, is they're bringing healing and reconciliation between soldiers from the Vietnam era and Vietnam. On the deathbed, I asked my father one day if I had a chance to go back to Vietnam, would I have his blessing? And he gave me his blessing because my father wanted to see healing and wholeness between our country and Vietnam. To be able to be partnered with Duquesne and Friends of Da Nang, I could never have imagined. Volunteers and other groups that do amazingly wonderful work for our veterans that need to be recognized. I wish I had time to elaborate on all the other organizations, veteran and non-veteran, faith-based and government agencies, private and businesses and trade unions that give to the work of helping homeless veterans. But volunteers, no organization that works with the homeless or homeless veterans could exist or survive without volunteers. You can't put a price tag on the gift-in-kind donation of volunteer hours. We have literally hundreds and hundreds and maybe even several thousand of volunteers during the course of the year that work with us at Shepherd's Heart. We have 150 partnerships, 90 plus churches of all denominations. Can you imagine that? Orthodox, Catholic, Anglican, Episcopal, Presbyterian, Lutheran, Methodist, non-denomination. We even have the Jewish War Veterans Association we work with. We have other groups that are of different faiths that bring food and help us. Because one thing we have in common as a human group of our country is so humane is our love for the poor, to take care of those that are hurting, and especially our veterans. Organizations, I wish I could tell more about. Veterans Leadership Program, they were shared a little bit about what they do. But you need to know what Veterans Leadership Program does. Every year, for 4 years, we've been doing a stand down. We've been bringing agencies of volunteers all together to be able homeless veterans, a one-day homeless veteran trade show, bringing veterans from all over southwestern Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, to be able to find the resources. How can they find the resources to get off the streets wherever they are? And it's been so successful, primarily because of the incredible leadership of Veterans Leadership Program. Organizations like Veterans Place, Transitional Housing, Sheckley Mecklenburg, American Legion in Coriopolis. The American Legion in Coriopolis was probably the first transitional housing program in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County in the 90s. Operation Safety Net and Mercy Behavioral. Dr. Jim Withers and his team are on the streets every day of the week, going under bridges, bringing medical care to non-homeless veterans and homeless veterans alike. DAV, the local and state chapter, the Paralyzed American Veterans, VVI, and then Rolling Thunder Chapter 4 and 5 have been working with Shepherd's Heart for years, bringing resources and volunteer help to help our veterans. The Ride for Homeless Veterans, working with VFW in Tarentum and Natrona Heights. Every summer, one day, all these 200 to 300 motorcyclists ride for a day and raised $10,000 riding motorcycles last year for Shepherd's Heart Veterans Home. And I need to mention my bishop, the Archbishop, the Anglican Diocese of Pittsburgh. For over 18 years, he has supported my wife and I and my children and our vision and our passion to help the homeless and our veterans. What a partnership that we have with our bishop and our diocese. Our VA, I mentioned, they've changed. All these veteran and non-veteran organizations, and all that they do is amazing. In conclusion, we recited the Pledge of Allegiance when we started. I want to say just the last part of it for a moment. Listen to these words. One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On February 7th, 1954, at the New York Avenue Presbyterian Church, Reverend Dr. George McPherson Doherty preached a message, a sermon entitled, A New Birth of Freedom. And in attendance that Sunday morning was President Eisenhower, General Ike. He was sitting in the booth that President Lincoln had sat in. Dr. Daugherty challenged those in attendance, especially focused on President Eisenhower. He said, the nation's might lay not in her arms, her military might, but in its spirit, in its higher purpose. The nation's might lay not in her arms, her military might, but in her spirit and higher purpose. When the service was over, President Eisenhower heard the call, heard the challenge. He took the phrase, under God, and challenged the Congress to amend the Pledge of Allegiance and put it into what we said this morning. On Flag Day, June 14th, 1954, a joint resolution of Congress amended the Pledge of Allegiance that we said today. I believe that we do have the world's greatest might, greatest military. However, I also believe, as represented here today, the might of our country and our nation and its history, and I pray our future, our might lies in our spirit, its spirit, and our higher purpose. What you see this morning, Veterans Day, 11/11/2011, is the might of our nation, government, private sector, faith-based, veteran organization, non-veterans, businesses, volunteers. It goes on and on. You, my brothers and sisters, are the might of our nation. It's an honor to be with you. As a veteran to a veteran is a privilege. But I challenge you, if you know a veteran that's hurting, if you see a combat veteran returning from Iraq or Afghanistan that is struggling, ask somebody to help them. There are literally thousands upon thousands of veterans like you and I that are ready and willing to help, to respond to a veteran who's homeless or broken, to get them the help they deserve. The city of Pittsburgh, Allegheny County in southwestern Pennsylvania, we have so much to be proud of on this Veterans Day. However, I'm challenging you again, we must never forget our brothers and our sisters that are in the military, in combat overseas, or all our military around the world. We must never forget our veterans that are sick and dying in our hospitals. We must never forget the families of loved ones lost at war, our Gold Star mothers, our Gold Star wives, our Gold Star families. We can never forget our POWs, and we can never forget our MIAs. And I pray we never forget our homeless veterans. We must never forget the price so many have paid. And I tell people this all the time. We must do it together. God bless you, my brothers and sisters. I salute you for your service to our nation, our country, your families, and to our veterans. God bless you.